economist, SPM professionals. Hello, Paul, and welcome to the program. Okay, Paul, I need you to unmute because I can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you so very much for having me. Good morning.
Morning. Paul, let's just really go down into this. That should be November 2021 inflation data, not December. We're still in December, so we should take that off. If we take a look at the 2021, that's November inflation data that was released on Wednesday by the National Bureau of Statistics, I want you really to break it down because what Nigerians would typically say is that inflation, they say, is going down, but the price of goods in the market are not going down. Can you just quickly break it down and what that data means?
Okay, so when you look at the reports recently shared by the National Bureau of Statistics, it shows that inflation is increasing at a reducing rate. And if I have time, I will get into that. The last figures we had before this was 15.99%. approximately 16%, which was also a downward review compared to what we had in September. So October was 15.9 now. The recent report shows that it's also increasing at a slower rate of 15.4%. So it does not mean that inflation is no more there. It's saying that the rate of increase of inflation compared to last year, 2020, recall that the headline inflation published by the Bureau of Statistics is year on year. If you want to compare what happened on month, it's saying that inflation still increased at an increasing rate of about 1.08%. The same report published by the National Bureau of Statistics. So when you go to the market, it is possible actually that you will see that things are increasing because number one, inflation is still high at 15.4% is still quite high. When you look at the target of the central bank, between 6 to 9%, single digit inflation, between 6 to 9%, which CBN has had for a while. I'm not sure if that expectation or that target has changed. So that on one side. On the second side, it also does not mean that the figure is not correct. It doesn't mean so. Because when you compare what you had in 2020 to 2019, there was lockdown at this time last year. We're still having partial reopening of the economy. Not everyone worked. Some organization, it was 3 days in a month, some 2 days. People were still very skeptical at going out. Some states still, they were still reviewing. I'm not sure if airline have started to operate in full capacity. Maybe some of the airport has been open, as at this time last year. So prices were really, really, really high for most average commodities. So, but for this year, the economy has been reopened. We have seen the effect of those on the GDP numbers published by National Bureau of Statistics earlier this year. And we have seen improvement in some of the sectors that were closed down. So inflation is still increasing. We are just saying that the rate of increase in inflation numbers were not as high as what we had last year, when last year is compared to 2019, and when we are comparing this year to last year. So, but what most people want to see is, the price of commodity is still increasing in the market, and quite a number of other things is increasing. I bought a commodity last month. I'm going back to the market to buy foodstuff. It's still going up. What exactly is happening? So that has been captured in month-on-month growth rate. And apart from those, we should also know that the basket National Bureau of Statistics is capturing is not just one commodity, it's a lot of commodity, and it's the average of all of these commodities that is published under headline inflation. So, but when you look at the breakdown, you can be looking at sectorial approach, which sector had higher inflation, which one had lower inflation. You may be looking at real estate construction, you may be looking at food inflation, you may be looking at core inflation, urban inflation, rural inflation. These are the things that the National Bureau of Statistics had put together before they came up with the figure headline inflation. So if you're applying just headline inflation alone to some sectors, you might not get it accurately, even though headline inflation number is so very important and so very good for you to consider. So for me and for our organization, we trust the numbers and we believe that 15.4 is a reflection of when you compare that to last year, 2020, November. But properly speaking, and this is very important because I've heard a lot of people saying inflation is reducing. Inflation is reducing relative to what we had last year. The proper way of saying it is that inflation is increasing at a reducing rate. It's growing at a reducing rate, so that those who may not really understand the numbers and all of those will understand that yes, we still have inflation, but the growth rate is now getting a bit slower than what we had at this time last month when we compare the 2 years that have been made the base year. That's 2020, and also comparing that with 2021.
Paul, I appreciate that you explained that, because even on the show yesterday when I was telling our viewers that we're expecting inflation numbers, I had to do that preliminary explanation in terms of what it means. So I like that you said that. But that also brings me to the point of, do you think that inflation numbers or economic data, okay, let me say inflation data, do you think is well reported or well explained? And I know perhaps I could be talking to my community and perhaps analysts such as you. Do you think is well explained for people to understand, or is too technical? I know not many of us do this, what I do, on television or in broadcast. We are not so many into the business area. But do you think that we report it accurately and for people to understand?
Well, I would say when it comes to the technicality, it's a no thing. But when you say just publishing the number, a lot of media houses are doing that. But those that have gone further to further educate people, very few of you, very, very few, and I mean very, very, very few of you. And I call you Nigerian stars because you have not robbed the people the knowledge that they should have about the numbers. I don't think we are reporting economic data enough, but if we don't, it has danger. You know, when we just talk about the headlines, what the newspapers are saying, which is not wrong, but we don't go into the details to provide proper education for people. People may now be losing faith in the publication or in the report, because when you say that inflation reduced and you just put the figure 15.4%, what does it mean? In real sense, inflation actually increased, but at a reducing rate. So that when you say inflation reduced, you've already lost some persons who feel that, well, if inflation reduced, I went to a market, I bought a cup for my child. The cup was 50 naira. Now they told me the cup is 60 naira. Just within a month. What is happening? For those who are into iron bending, and we have quite a lot of them, fabricators, welders, they said they bought angle iron 50 by 50. You know, they bought it last year at about 5,200. This year, they are telling them 50 by 50 at 5 mm of the same angle iron is now 6,300. But you are saying inflation has reduced. So properly speaking, we are saying inflation has increased by 15.4% when you compare this year to last year, but this is at a reducing rate compared to October this year to October last year. So that would be a proper thing to say. And I would want more and more people to see, to emulate, you know, those of you that have been very brilliant in making issues that people may not really get, because this could also cause distrust. People may not trust government. People may think that because it's a government agency reporting the numbers, maybe the numbers have been falsified. Maybe these are not the truth. So it's always important that people get to know that when we say inflation reduced, we may be saying beyond that. So people saying inflation reduced may not be wrong, but those that are saying inflation increased may also not be wrong. But what is the truth? The truth is that inflation is still increasing. Inflation is still high, but it's growing at a reducing rate.
Paul, while you were speaking, I took my mind back to November of 2020, and I tried to remember the inflation rate for November of 2020, and I quickly checked, 14.89%, November of 2020. That was what the inflation rate, November of 2020, was. Now we're at 15.4%. What does it really say? If you take a look at between that time and now, one would say, okay, we're at 15.4% as against 14.89%. Inflation this year is definitely more than last year. How can you explain it? And does that also justify the prices of commodities that we're seeing right now a year later?
Okay, so when you look at last year inflation figure November, it's it's above 14%. So that 14% was inflation measure compared to 2019. So when you compare 2019 November to 2020 November, inflation figures, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, increased by over 14%. That on one hand. So it actually increased. Inflation grew. That is, prices, average price grew. So that we put what inflation means, average price, it increased by over 14%. That was between November 2019 compared to November 2020. When you now compare November 2020 to November 2021, authorities is saying that inflation now increased by 15.4%. The question is, so where is the reduction? Here is the reduction. When you compare it month and month, November, December, January, February, inflation has gone high to 18%. Now it has started coming down. So I remember I spoke with one of the persons in government on one of the TV shows, and he was talking about GDP figures, and he quickly thought, because what was reported in Q1 and he saw Q2, you know, which were speaking to different things, therefore quarter on quarter was good. You know, he never read the report. The report actually indicated that quarter on quarter GDP was sluggish of National Bureau of Statistics. So when you look at what happened between 2020 and 2019, it's only talking about that space, that period. November and November 2020, November 2019 and November 2020. That has no connection to November 2020 and November 2021. When you start comparing the two figures, then we'll be having issues. But what you compare is the price index, composite price index for 2020 November and composite price index for 2021 November. When you compare the two rates, we will now see that inflation has actually increased. But the rate of increase in November 2020 and November 2021, when you compare it with October, now I'm comparing it with just a month just before that time, not November 2019 and 2020. When you compare it with October, and October which year, 2020 and October 2021, the composite index. So this has grown. If you check the October 2020 and 2021, when you check that, it was 15.99. So when you now check October 2020, November 2020, I beg your pardon, and November 2021, according to the National Bureau of Statistics, it is 15.4. So obviously, for the period we are tracking, the month we are tracking, we can see that has improved from 15.99, approximately 16%, to 15.4. Therefore, we would say that inflation is growing at a reducing rate. Underline the word growing, which means we still have high inflation, double-digit inflation. 15% is still very high anywhere in the world. But when you look at it compared to the month we just came from, which is November, we will say that, okay, we are not there, but we are now going into right direction. Before, we wanted to go to Lagos from Abuja, but we were speeding towards Kaduna and heading directly towards Kano. You know, with that is clearly wrong direction. Someday we'll find ourselves in Sokoto. But now we have now made that U-turn. We are now back in Abaji, you know, going towards Gwagwalada, and that may take us eventually to Kogi State, and that may lead us in Lagos, you know. So we are now going towards Kogi State from the F seats, which means we are going into right direction. How fast are we going to get to our destination? It's a different conversation entirely, and that conversation will be perhaps what monetary policy authority have been doing, kept rates quite low, 11.5% compared to 14%, and we have seen improvement in the GDP, over 5% the first quarter, the initial quarter report, and the last quarter report reported was 4.03%. The monetary authority has not said, well, I think it's now time for us to improve rate. Rather, rate has been held constant, so that we can see the effect of the policy made. Perhaps inflation will come down to about 12%, 11% before we can now be talking of review of rate. I would have watched the growth if it is real or camouflage. But because when you look at the base year of the last two GDP report that was reported, that was the time we declared the economy to be in recession. So if you are comparing growth rates with the recession time, it may not give you the accurate performance of the economy. Yes, it is positive rate, but we need to wait for 2 more quarters for us to say whether this economy has really improved or not.
Paul, let's try as much as possible to dissect in the next few minutes that we have, because I have another guest and I'll be looking at aviation when we come back from the break. Let's dissect this, the components of what the MBS measures, food inflation, core inflation, rural, urban inflation, and all of that. But if we take a look at month on month, or even any time that this data has been released, we see that food inflation makes up so much of this basket. And in fact, MBS2 released a report, I think in 2019 or 2018, that Nigerians spend about 56% of their income on food. So whatever you make, majority of what you make goes to food. So can you just quickly dissect it for our viewers, especially that food component that also takes some other things, because we'll see even farm produce, even direct from the farm. How about the cost of imported food too, that also has some FX component to it?
Okay, so food inflation in Nigeria remains quite high. And from the report I have here, food inflation affects quite a number of factors, from fish and every other thing, even food items, security. And one of the factors affecting that, is that food inflation dropped significantly to 17.2% in November 2021 from 18.34%. So what we have seen is that food inflation is still higher than the headline inflation. So when you remove food, what you have left, you'll be talking about core inflation. So this drop is what is perhaps responsible for the drop in the headline inflation, because food inflation is now the driver of our inflation, of the headline inflation that we have in Nigeria. And when you look at it on month-on-month basis, food inflation increased. So when we go to the market and we want to buy fish or we want to buy anything, we see that the price has increased even month on month. So you would observe that even National Bureau of Statistics says the price of food the average price of food in the last 1 month has increased by over 1% in the month of November. So this reflects what some of the experiences that people are having. Now the question is, somebody who buy tomato and say the price of tomato is somebody buy a bag of rice and they say the price of bag of rice is higher. We also need to look at when is the harvest season, because we have not been able to perfect the storage facility. And for people listening, there are responsibility that we as a people must have, and there are also responsibility that government must have, private sector must also have. Generally, we have security challenge, which we cannot wish away. Security challenge affects the availability of food, if you ask me, because some of the farmers are now relocating, and even maybe non-farmers, people in rural community that help with farming as labor and so on and so forth. You now see them in urban center. And if you check the urban inflation is even higher than rural inflation, because we continue to see rural-urban migration. People are moving to rural center, for security and so on and so forth. We saw what trended on social media regarding Sokoto State. Whether it is confirmed or not, it's another thing entirely. As we continue to see some individuals taking over or going to attack some of the citizens of our country in different parts, especially now the northern part of our country, and that is giving quite a number of us worries. And we have also started losing even professionals who are scared for their life. And when you look at what do we call it now? When you look at labor force of Nigeria, it is not just inflation that increased. It is not just unemployment that increased. Even labor force has reduced, which means population that is willing and able to work, that could have been part of labor force, have left the country. Even at that, I expect that unemployment should reduce with that happening. Unemployment rather increased to 33%. So we have quite a number of things. Security is there, logistics, movement from one point to another. I really don't know when last you used Abuja, Kaduna, but that is one of the places I'm concerned, traveling by road, maybe not because I've been attacked on that road, but because of the reports that has been shared and people have. So that already is giving a lot of concern. Then when you talk about food, maybe we have those who want to process food come to Nigeria, but because we know that the North seems to have more food output than the South. Now, because of insecurity in the North, people may be concerned in putting investment. Watch this, our foreign direct investment continue to be, to nosedive, because the environment seems not to be conducive for this investment to come to our country. Therefore, authorities, we need to do more, you know, using whatever method is allowable to ensure that our farmers are able to go back, and those that have been displaced are able to go back with the assurance of security of life and property, to go back and improve output. Because for most of us, for some of us, we have no other country apart from here. Yeah. And the growth of Nigeria, the development of Nigeria remains paramount to all of us. And I hope that this change and this difference will come in no time.
Okay, Paul, in just 30 seconds, what's your outlook as we coast towards the end of the year? Just a few days to the end of the year. Do you think that this downside that we're seeing in inflation, this reduction in the growth of inflation will continue? And what's your outlook for next year?
Well, at worst, we might see a flat inflation rate because of December. You know that the demand is always energized in December. People want to buy A, B, C, D. So you might see some form of flat figures when you compare, because last year we also made demand, but demand may not be as much as what we have this year, because last year income was really emaciated. So, but you might still be around 15% even for December figures. But from January, when you can now see if the economy has grown, has truly grown or not, this pre-election year, we'll be seeing some growth within the economy. Crude oil prices is expected to grow further. We're also expecting that at the end of this year, GDP growth rate may not be less than 2.4%, between 2.4 to 3% is the expectation and projected growth rate for the economy. So next year is pre-election year. We're expecting that because of political activity that, of course, which precedes 2023, we might see some improvement in unemployment, in inflation, and in GDP growth rate in the year 2022.
Thank you very much, Paul, for sticking with us, at least for this last few minutes. Thank you very much, and I wish you a lovely week. In case we don't see you before Christmas, take this as a Merry Christmas greeting. All right, I've been speaking with Paul Alaje, who is the lead economist at SPM Professional. So let's quickly take this break and move to another part of the economy. I'll be looking at the aviation sector. Captain Roland Iyaye, the former MD at Nigerian Space Management Agency, will be joining me, and we will be zeroing in with my Googles into the aviation sector. We'll be right back after the break. Don't forget to join us on all our social media platforms.